The obsidian conclave shimmered, a chamber carved from the heart of a captive singularity, its walls a swirling vortex of trapped light and frozen time. Here, gravity itself was a whisper, and the delegates of the galactic concordance floated in their designated spheres of influence, their forms bathed in the cool, eternal twilight of the chamber's core. The air, a carefully synthesized blend of noble gases and trace psionic resonators, hummed with an unspoken tension that was far more oppressive than any physical weight. At the center of this grand, silent theater of power, a single topic held the collective consciousness of 1,000 worlds in its grip: humanity. The debate had raged for cycles, a slow, grinding affair of meticulously worded arguments and veiled threats, yet no consensus had been reached. The humans, those strange, fleeting bipeds from a forgotten arm of the galaxy, remained an enigma, a dissonant chord in the symphony of established order. They were a paradox, a species of bewildering contradictions that defied every metric the concordance had ever devised. Their technology was primitive, their lifespans laughably short, their biology fragile and inefficient. Yet they had spread across their local star cluster with a speed that was unsettling, their expansion marked not by the grand fleets and overwhelming firepower of a nascent empire, but by a quiet, inexorable persistence that was somehow more unnerving. The High Executor of the Cygnian Ascendancy, a being of crystalline intellect and immense age, projected his thoughts into the conclave, his voice a chorus of perfectly harmonized frequencies. "We have granted them a vessel," he resonated, the statement echoing in the minds of every delegate. "A gesture of inclusion, a token to placate their nascent ambition and bring them into the fold of civilized space where they can be observed and, if necessary, contained." His words were meant to be reassuring, a balm on the frayed nerves of the assembled powers, but they carried an undercurrent of something else, something that bordered on contempt. The vessel in question, the Starglider, was a relic, a decommissioned freighter from a forgotten era, stripped of all but the most rudimentary systems. It was a ship designed for hauling ore, not for navigating the treacherous currents of interstellar politics. To the humans, it was a gift of unimaginable value, their first true starship capable of traversing the vast emptiness between worlds. To the concordance, it was a leash, a carefully calculated insult disguised as a magnanimous act of charity. It was a ship that screamed their inferiority, a constant reminder of their place at the very bottom of the galactic hierarchy. The Cygnian High Executor was confident in this assessment. He had studied the humans, their history a chaotic tapestry of self-inflicted violence and fleeting moments of brilliance. They were a species of poets and warriors, of dreamers and destroyers, a volatile cocktail of emotions that made them fundamentally unpredictable. But their technology, their raw power, was insignificant. That was the one constant, the one verifiable fact in a sea of unknowns. A dissenting voice, sharp and discordant, cut through the High Executor's placid certainty. It belonged to the Vorlag Prime, a being of molten rock and simmering fury, his thoughts a cascade of volcanic eruptions. "You underestimate them, Executor," the Vorlag's mind voice seethed, the psionic energy in the chamber crackling with his barely contained rage. "You see their primitive tools and their fragile forms, and you dismiss them as children playing with fire. But I have seen their worlds. I have seen the scars they have carved into their own planet, the monuments they have built to their own savagery. They are not children. They are a dormant volcano, a sleeping giant that you have just handed a sharpened stick." The Vorlag Prime had long been a voice of caution, a Cassandra figure whose dire warnings were often dismissed as the paranoid ramblings of a species that had only recently emerged from its own dark age of interstellar conflict. But his words held a certain weight, a gravitas that could not be easily ignored. He spoke of the human capacity for what they called art, intricate patterns of sound and light that could evoke emotions in even the most stoic of beings. He spoke of their philosophy, their endless, obsessive quest for meaning in a meaningless universe. And he spoke of their wars, conflicts of such scale and ferocity that they had nearly extinguished their own species on multiple occasions. The Vorlag Prime saw not weakness in this, but a terrifying strength, a relentless, self-destructive drive that could, if turned outward, shatter the delicate balance of the concordance. The debate continued, a slow, ponderous dance of diplomacy and thinly veiled aggression. The delegates of the Mycospore Collective, a fungal intelligence that spanned a Ozen worlds, argued for a more organic approach. They proposed a slow, subtle infiltration of human society, a gentle guiding of their development towards a more peaceful, more predictable path. The idea was met with a mixture of intrigue and revulsion. The prospect of melding their own consciousness with the chaotic, emotional minds of the humans was a horrifying one, yet the potential rewards, the taming of this wild, untamed species, were undeniable. Others, like the enigmatic Void Weavers, beings of pure energy who existed in the spaces between stars, remained silent, their presence a constant, unsettling reminder of the vast, unknowable universe that lay beyond the comfortable confines of the Concordance. They had witnessed the rise and fall of countless civilizations, and they knew that the most dangerous threats often came not from the strongest, but from the most unexpected. The humans, meanwhile, were blissfully unaware of the cosmic drama unfolding around them. They were too busy marveling at their new toy. The Starglider, which they had christened the Odyssey, was to them a miracle. It was a vessel that could carry them to the stars, a key that would unlock the secrets of the universe. They were a young species, full of a boundless, almost naive optimism, and they saw the gift of the Starglider not as an insult, but as an invitation. An invitation to join a grand cosmic conversation, a chance to prove their worth to the ancient, powerful beings who had deigned to notice them. Their crew, a hand-picked team of their brightest and best, approached their mission with a quiet, focused determination that would have surprised their alien benefactors. They were not warriors, but scientists and explorers, their minds filled not with dreams of conquest, but with a deep, abiding curiosity about the universe and their place within it. They spent their days meticulously studying the ship's systems, learning its quirks and idiosyncrasies, pushing its ancient engines to their limits. They were like children with a complex puzzle, their apathetic benefactors having given them a toy they assumed would occupy them for a time before they grew bored and moved on. The ship was, by all concordance standards, a piece of junk. It was slow, inefficient, and lacked any of the advanced weaponry or defensive systems that were standard on even the most basic of alien vessels. But the humans, with their peculiar brand of ingenuity, saw not its limitations, but its potential. They saw a blank canvas, a vessel that could be molded and shaped to their own unique specifications. They saw a challenge, and they embraced it with a passion that bordered on obsession. The captain of the Odyssey, a woman named Eva Rostova, was the embodiment of this human spirit. She was a quiet, unassuming woman with eyes that held a universe of unspoken thoughts. She had spent her life gazing at the stars, dreaming of the day when humanity would finally take its place among them. Now that day had come, and she felt the weight of her entire species on her shoulders. She was not a soldier, she was a dreamer, but she understood that the two were not always mutually exclusive. She knew that the universe was not a benevolent place, that there were dangers lurking in the darkness between stars, and she was determined to be prepared for them. She and her crew worked tirelessly, their days a blur of complex calculations and intricate engineering. They repurposed the ship's cargo holds, turning them into makeshift laboratories and workshops. They stripped down the ancient alien technology, reverse engineering it with a speed and an elegance that would have astounded its original creators. They were not just learning to fly their new ship, they were learning to make it their own. They were infusing it with their own unique brand of human ingenuity, their own stubborn refusal to accept the limitations that had been placed upon them. And as they worked, a strange thing began to happen. The Starglider, the worst ship in the galaxy, began to change. It was a subtle transformation at first, a slight hum in the engines that wasn't there before, a new warmth in the recycled air. But soon, the changes became more pronounced. The ship seemed to come alive, its ancient systems responding to the human's touch in ways that defied all known laws of physics. It was as if the ship itself was waking from a long slumber, its dormant potential finally being unlocked by the curious, determined minds of its new masters. Back in the Obsidian Conclave, the debate over humanity had reached a stalemate. The Cygnian High Executor, his patience wearing thin, had proposed a motion of containment. A fleet of Concordance warships would be dispatched to the humans' home system, a quarantine to ensure that their unpredictable nature did not spread to the rest of the galaxy. The proposal was met with a storm of protest. The Vorlag Prime, his mind voice a thunderous roar, AC. Accused the Executor of cowardice, of seeking to crush a potential rival before it had a chance to grow. The Mycospore Collective, in a rare display of unity, warned of the unforeseen consequences of such a rash action. To provoke a species as volatile as the humans, they argued, was to invite a conflict that could have devastating repercussions for the entire Concordance. The Void Weavers, for the first time in centuries, broke their silence. Their collective consciousness, a whisper of starlight and cosmic dust, filled the conclave. "The future is not written in stone," they resonated, their words a cryptic warning that sent a shiver of unease through the assembled delegates. "The smallest pebble can start an avalanche." The High Executor, however, was not a being to be swayed by vague prophecies and emotional outbursts. He was a creature of logic and reason, and his logic told him that humanity was a threat. A minor threat, to be sure, but a threat nonetheless. And threats, no matter how small, needed to be dealt with. He pressed for a vote, his crystalline mind confident of the outcome. The Concordance, for all its internal squabbles, was a conservative body. It valued stability and order above all else, and the humans, with their chaotic, unpredictable nature, were the antithesis of everything the Concordance stood for. The vote was a formality. The quarantine was approved. A fleet of warships, the pride of the Concordance, was dispatched to the Sol system. They were a magnificent sight, a flotilla of silver and gold, their sleek, elegant forms gliding through the void with a silent, deadly grace. They were armed with the most advanced weaponry in the galaxy, their shields capable of withstanding the fury of a dying star. They were the embodiment of the Concordance's power, a symbol of its unassailable authority. They were an instrument of peace, or so their commanders had been told. Their mission was to observe and report, to maintain a protective cordon around the humans' home world. But everyone knew what their true purpose was. They were there to intimidate, to remind the upstart humans of their place in the grand scheme of things. The arrival of the Concordance fleet in the Sol system was a moment of profound shock for humanity. For generations, they had dreamed of this day, the day they would finally make contact with an intelligent alien species. They had imagined a moment of wonder and discovery, a meeting of minds that would usher in a new era of enlightenment and cooperation. The reality was far more terrifying. The sight of the alien warships, their colossal forms blotting out the stars, sent a wave of fear and panic across the globe. For the first time in their history, humanity was united not by a shared dream but by a shared terror. The governments of Earth, in a rare display of unity, scrambled to respond. Their own fledgling space fleet, a pathetic collection of repurposed satellites and antiquated rockets, was no match for the alien armada. They were outgunned, outmaneuvered, and hopelessly outclassed. The situation seemed hopeless. The end of their civilization, it seemed, was at hand. But then something unexpected happened. The Odyssey, the worst ship in the galaxy, returned. It had been on a long-range exploratory mission, charting the unknown regions of space beyond the Concordance's borders. It had been out of contact for months, and many had given it up for lost. But now it was back, a lone, tiny speck against the backdrop of the massive alien fleet. It was a suicidal gesture, a futile act of defiance in the face of overwhelming odds. Or so it seemed. The Concordance fleet, their sensors locked on the approaching vessel, registered its pathetic power signature with a sense of bemused contempt. It was a gnat buzzing around a dragon, a child throwing pebbles at a fortress. The fleet commander, a stern and humorless Cygnian admiral, gave the order to ignore it. The human ship was a nuisance, nothing more. It would be dealt with later after the main objective had been achieved. But the Odyssey did not retreat. It continued its slow, deliberate approach, its single, flickering navigation light a beacon of defiance in the darkness. And then, it did something that no one, not even the humans on Earth, could have predicted. It began to sing. It was a song of unimaginable beauty and complexity, a symphony of light and sound and pure, unadulterated energy. It was a song that resonated with the very fabric of space-time, a song that spoke of ancient stars and forgotten galaxies, of the birth of the universe and the slow, inevitable heat-death of all things. It was a song that was both terrifying and beautiful, a song that filled the minds of the Concordance fleet's crews with a sense of awe and wonder and a deep, primal fear. The Cygnian admiral, his crystalline mind reeling from the psychic onslaught, struggled to understand what was happening. His ship's sensors were going haywire. Their delicate instruments overwhelmed by the sheer power of the human ship's transmission. The song was not just a sound, it was a weapon of unimaginable power, a weapon that targeted not the hulls of their ships but the minds of their crews. The alien sailors, their minds filled with the symphony of the cosmos, were lost in a trance, their hands frozen on their controls, their faces a mixture of ecstasy and terror. They were like moths drawn to a flame. They were completely subsumed by the irresistible beauty of the human song. The Odyssey, its song now reaching a crescendo, began to move. It was no longer the slow, lumbering freighter it had once been. It was now a thing of impossible grace and speed, its movements a blur of light and motion. It danced through the Concordance fleet, its single, tiny form weaving a complex, intricate pattern around the massive warships. And as it danced, it left a trail of destruction in its wake. The alien ships, their crews still lost in the rapture of the song, were helpless. Their shields flickered and died, their weapon systems overloaded and exploded, their engines sputtered and failed. They were being dismantled, piece by piece, by a single unarmed human ship. The Cygnian admiral, his mind a maelstrom of confusion and disbelief, could only watch in horror as his magnificent fleet was reduced to a collection of smoldering wrecks. He had underestimated the humans. He had underestimated them in a way that was so profound, so complete, that it bordered on the comical. He had seen their primitive technology and their fragile forms, and he had dismissed them as insignificant. He had not seen their true strength, their boundless creativity, their indomitable will. He had not seen the song in their hearts, the fire in their souls. He had not seen the terrible beauty of their rage. The battle, if it could be called that, was over in a matter of minutes. The pride of the Concordance fleet, the symbol of its unassailable authority, was gone. The Odyssey, its song now a soft, mournful whisper, drifted silently in the void, a lone sentinel amidst the wreckage of a fallen empire. On Earth, a stunned silence had fallen. The humans, who had been on the brink of annihilation just moments before, could only stare at their screens in disbelief. They had been saved not by a fleet of their own, but by a single ancient starship, a ship that they had been given as a cosmic joke. They had been saved by a song. It was a moment of profound revelation, a moment that would forever change the course of human history. They were not alone in the universe, and they were not as weak as they had once believed. The news of the Concordance fleet's destruction sent a shockwave through the Obsidian conclave. The delegates, their minds still reeling from the psychic feedback of the battle, were in a state of disarray. The Cygnian High Executor, his crystalline form now radiating a cold, hard fury, demanded retribution. He called for the full might of the Concordance to be brought to bear against the humans, to crush them, to exterminate them, to wipe their very memory from the annals of galactic history. But his words were met with a stony silence. The other delegates, their arrogance shattered by the brutal reality of their defeat, were no longer so quick to dismiss the Vorlag Prime's warnings. They had seen the power of the humans, a power that was not measured in megatons or shield strength, but in something far more profound, something they could not even begin to comprehend. The Vorlag Prime, his molten form now glowing with a grim satisfaction, rose to speak. His mind voice, no longer a seething rage, was now a low, rumbling growl of respect. "I told you," he resonated, his words echoing in the silent chamber. "I told you they were not children. They are a force of nature, a storm that has been brewing on the edge of our galaxy for millennia, and now the storm has broken." The Mycospore Collective, their fungal intelligence now buzzing with a nervous energy, proposed a new course of action. Not one of aggression, but of diplomacy. They suggested that a delegation be sent to the humans to apologize for their misunderstanding and to offer them a place of honor within the Concordance. The idea was met with a mixture of disbelief and reluctant agreement. The thought of bowing to a species they had so recently dismissed as primitives was a bitter pill to swallow, but the alternative, a full-scale war with a species that could dismantle their most powerful fleets with a song, was unthinkable. The Void Weavers, their silent presence now more unsettling than ever, offered a single cryptic comment. "The song has ended," they whispered, their words a ripple of starlight in the darkness. "But the symphony has just begun." On board the Odyssey, a quiet sense of awe and trepidation had settled over the crew. They had done the impossible. They had defeated a fleet that should been invincible. But their victory was not a cause for celebration. It was a sobering reminder of the power they now wielded, a power they had not even known they possessed. Captain Rostova stood on the bridge, her eyes fixed on the image of Earth on the main view screen. The planet, a beautiful blue marble in the vast emptiness of space, seemed so small, so fragile. She had saved it, but at what cost? She had shown the galaxy the true power of humanity, but in doing so had she also revealed their greatest weakness, their capacity for destruction, their ability to unleash a force that could shatter worlds. The song, the weapon they had used to defeat the Concordance fleet, was not something they had created. It was something they had discovered, a hidden protocol buried deep within the Starglider's ancient systems, a protocol that was not meant for them. It was a failsafe, a last resort, a weapon of last resort designed by a long-vanished race, a race that had apparently faced a threat far greater than the Concordance. The humans, in their desperate attempt to understand their new ship, had stumbled upon a power that was beyond their comprehension, a power that could just as easily destroy them as it could save them. The arrival of the Concordance diplomatic delegation was a tense affair. The aliens, their forms a bizarre collection of shapes and colors, were a far cry from the terrifying warriors of the fleet. They were scholars and politicians, their minds filled with a cautious curiosity and a deep-seated fear. They had come to offer peace, to offer an alliance, to offer humanity a place among the stars. Captain Rostova met with them in the Odyssey's small, Spartan conference room. She was not a diplomat, she was a scientist, but she understood the weight of this moment. The future of her species and perhaps the future of the entire galaxy rested on her shoulders. She listened to their apologies, their offers of friendship, their promises of a new era of cooperation. She listened with a quiet, patient grace, her face a mask of calm composure. But her mind was a whirlwind of questions. Who were these beings? What did they truly want? And what of the song? What of the ancient, powerful race that had built this ship and hidden this terrible weapon within it? The Concordance delegates, for all their advanced knowledge and their millennia of experience, had no answers. They were as lost, as confused as the humans. They had encountered a power that was beyond their understanding, a power that had shaken their entire civilization to its core. And then, as the negotiations reached a critical juncture, something else happened, something that would once again change everything. A new signal, a new song echoed through the void. It was not like the song of the Odyssey. It was older, more powerful, a song that spoke of a darkness that was deeper than the space between stars. It was a song of hunger, a song of endless, insatiable appetite. It was a song that had not been heard in the galaxy for eons. The Void Weavers, their forms now shimmering with a frantic, desperate energy, revealed the truth. The song was a warning from the ancient race that had built the Starglider, a warning of a threat that was far greater than any of them could have imagined, a threat that was now awakening from its long slumber, a threat that was coming for them all. The Concordance, the humans, the entire galaxy, they were all standing on the precipice of a new, terrifying age, the age of the Silentium. A cosmic horror, a devourer of galaxies, a being of unimaginable power that had been dormant for millions of years. The Starglider, the worst ship in the galaxy, was not a freighter. It was a key to a lost technology, a lost power, a lost hope. It was the only thing that stood between them and annihilation. The humans, the upstart, unpredictable species from a forgotten corner of the galaxy, were now the last, best hope for a universe on the brink of extinction. The symphony had just begun, and the final, terrible crescendo was yet to come. The Obsidian Conclave, now a chamber of shared dread, fell silent. The delegates, their individual fears and ambitions now dwarfed by a common terror, looked to one another, their ancient rivalries and petty squabbles forgotten. They were no longer Signian or Vorlag or Mycospore. They were simply alive, and they wanted to stay that way. Future, which had once seemed so certain, so ordered, was now a vast, terrifying unknown. And at the center of it all stood humanity, a species of poets and warriors, of dreamers and destroyers, a species that had been given the worst ship in the galaxy and had used it to save them all. Or perhaps to doom them. Only time would tell. The song of the Silentium grew louder, a mournful, hungry dirge that echoed in the hearts of every living thing in the galaxy. The age of the Concordance was over. The age of humanity had begun, and the universe would never be the same. The fragile alliance, forged in the crucible of shared terror, turned its collective gaze to the small, blue world that had so recently been the object of their scorn. Earth, the cradle of the storm, the birthplace of the symphony, and the last bastion of hope in a darkening universe. The Odyssey, its ancient hull now gleaming with a newfound purpose, stood ready. Its crew, their faces etched with a mixture of fear and resolve, prepared for the final, desperate battle. They were no longer just explorers, they were guardians. They were the inheritors of a legacy they had never asked for, the wielders of a power they did not fully understand. They were the last line of defense against an enemy that was older than the stars themselves, and they were not afraid, for they were human. And humanity, as the galaxy was about to learn, was a force to be reckoned with. The song of the Silentium was a song of death, but the humans, they had a song of their own. And it was a song of defiance, a song of hope, a song that would echo through the ages, a testament to the indomitable spirit of a species that had dared to reach for the stars and had, in doing so, become the saviors of a universe. The final battle was about to begin, and the fate of all things hung in the balance. The Odyssey, its single navigation light now a blazing star of defiance, turned to face the coming darkness, and waited. The silence that followed was a promise of a storm to come. A storm that would either cleanse the galaxy or consume it whole. And at the heart of the storm, a single, tiny ship and a species that had dared to dream. The universe held its breath. The symphony was about to reach its final, terrible, and beautiful conclusion.